You are officially invited. Yes, you. You're invited to join us in Fertility Awareness Mastery Live. This is my 10-week group coaching program designed to help you gain confidence using fertility awareness. Whether you're actively avoiding pregnancy or looking to optimize your cycles for conception, we have a spot for you. We start the last week of February. Are you ready to jump in? Head over to fertilityfriday.com/fam to register today. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAM. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 400. Welcome to the Fertility Friday podcast, your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm your host, Lisa Hendrickson-Jack. I'm the author of The Fifth Vital Sign and the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Journal. I'm a certified fertility awareness educator and holistic reproductive health practitioner with nearly 20 years of experience teaching women to connect to their fifth vital sign through menstrual cycle charting, balancing hormonal health, and optimizing the menstrual cycle without hormones. I'm outspoken about hormonal birth control and its impact on fertility and overall health because you have the right to know how your body works and how artificial hormones disrupt that natural process. I teach women's health professionals how to utilize the menstrual cycle as a vital sign in their practices, and I host live coaching programs to help you achieve optimal fertility and health, because it's important to have healthy menstrual cycles regardless of whether or not you want to have babies. I'm also a wife and mother of 2 beautiful boys. I know, I'm a busy girl, but I managed to fit it all in. This podcast is designed to empower you to take full control of your cycles, your fertility, and your overall health. And I'm so excited that you're here with me today. Welcome to the 400th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. I'm thrilled and excited to be here with you today and to be celebrating this really fun milestone. Really, 400 episodes. When I first started this podcast, I don't think I even had the conception in my mind of what that might be like or whether or not I would be still podcasting into my 8th year. So now I'm going into the 8th year of the podcast, and I really couldn't be happier. I feel just as passionate as I was at the beginning to share this information with women because it is life-changing. And I feel like today's episode is really suited, a really great episode to be sharing for this milestone. Today I'm sharing a brand new episode in my on-air client series. I'm sharing a call with my client Rachel, and one of the reasons that she joined the Fertility Awareness Mastery Live group coaching program last year was because she was thrilled to discover additional alternatives for birth control that were non-hormonal. So in this episode, Rachel shares her experience using different types of contraceptive methods and her transition off of hormonal birth control to fertility awareness. And we also talk a little bit about using fertility awareness for birth control. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode with Rachel. And I'm really excited to welcome Rachel to the show. Rachel is one of the members of Fertility Awareness Mastery Live. And we're recording this, I think, kind of in the middle of the program. I think we're a little bit past like the actual center. So this is a really great time, I think, to check in. We've had a couple of sessions together, but we've got lots to talk about today chart-wise. But before we jump into all of that, I'd love to give you an opportunity to just share a little bit about your experience. So, let us know when you had your first period and what that was like and how you manage your fertility and kind of what brought you to fertility awareness, if you used hormonal contraceptives before, all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I got my period when I was 12 and it was really, really heavy. And typically I had really heavy menstrual cycles for majority of my life up until recently, actually like the past 2 years. I'm 33. So I don't know if there's significance in age or just, anything there. Also, I've just been managing myself a little bit differently for a few reasons. So when I was having really heavy menstrual bleeds and then started becoming sexually active around like 16, 17, I had my first boyfriend and I started getting consistent UTIs. I also was diagnosed with a dermoid tumor in my left ovary. And it was really big and causing some constipation and causing some irritable bowel symptoms. And it was crushing my rectum. And I ended up having to get surgery for that. And they told me that I had cystic ovaries at the time. So this was inside my ovary and had to be removed. But there was also cysts outside of my ovary that fluctuated within my cycle. So at that point, they had sort of told me that hormonal birth control would be the way to manage that and might help alleviate symptoms of the UTIs that felt pretty chronic at the time. And so I went on hormonal birth control and I started using Yaz, And I remember then being diagnosed with like depression and anxiety. And I started having like really bad anxiety. It was like right around the same time. So it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. I'm not sure. But I had a lot of depression and anxiety. I actually also got put on medication for that. That was totally like a misdiagnosis. Like they put me on really heavy stuff. And I was on it also on hormonal birth control and everything. I felt like underwater. Everything felt a little strange. So I went off Yaz and then started going on orthotricycline low, which was fine mostly. I had a lot of acne at the time from it and definitely felt my anxiety, just like big mood shifts, just would feel really irritable and was sort of like generally angry. There was like maybe a week of alleviation from that feeling in my cycle. And then I got put on the generic version of orthotricycline low, and that was a disaster. So I gained 30 pounds in 4 months. I had really bad acne. My moods were all over the place. And I continued on with that for some time. And it was around junior year of high school. I was going to school with my sister. And she was kind of like, I need to talk to you. Like, you're not okay. You've gained a lot of weight. You just seem really unhappy. You're always angry. And I think you need to do something. I don't know what it is. And I'm like, do you think it's his birth control? She was like, maybe try that. Like we started exercising and eating healthier. I went off the birth control and I was like, fine. I went off medication kind of after that for depression and anxiety. And then I was off of that birth control for a really long time until I got another boyfriend later on. And then I tried the copper IUD briefly and was in severe pain from that. Like I could not walk around for like a month. And then I got it removed. And then I was off birth control and just using condoms and withdrawal. And then later in life, so I wasn't on birth control for a while. Later in life, I got pregnant from a person that I wasn't totally in a relationship with. And I think we ended up being in a relationship following the abortion. But yeah, I got an abortion and then got the copper IUD again because I was kind of like, okay, well, I need to do something, obviously. And same situation. It was just like awful cramping, couldn't handle it. Ended up getting it removed. I was also at the time having recurring UTIs, which recently I got diagnosed with interstitial cystitis or painful bladder syndrome, which is basically they're not UTIs. I'm having an autoimmune reaction to my bladder. So sometimes when my bladder's full, it's painful. Sometimes if I eat certain foods or have certain trigger things, I will get a episode. Sometimes I'm okay for like a year and a half and then nothing happens. And then I'll have like chronic pain that is really hard to manage. Also not something that's like studied, could be our hormonal thing too. Recently, they told me that periods can sometimes be a trigger for me, which might be due to the tampons or just however I'm managing my period. Again, like this is so unresearched, like there is no determinate information. It's all just trial and error. So they told me to get the Mirena to eliminate periods because then, I won't have these triggers. And again, a complete disaster, even worse than any other time because I'm older. I'm in a much more serious relationship. This is my like long-term committed partner. And this is like I want to solve this issue for us. So that was when a good friend of mine, Teresa, who you've also worked with, she was like, you need to try this fertility awareness method stuff. Like this will be so helpful in understanding your own health, like that when these triggers are occurring in your cycle, or just like she had known about my dermoid tumors and cystic ovaries and stuff. I also had at some point when I was living in Texas gotten diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And this guy was like, you're never going to be able to have kids, which is kind of why I was like loosey-goosey with sex after that, because he was like, yeah, you can't get pregnant. So, and I was like, oh, okay. And I'm like 23 and I had no information. And I remember being sad, but also like, I wasn't at any point ready. I wasn't in any moment of being ready to have children. So, and wasn't in a serious relationship. So wasn't considering that at all. But yeah, just constant like misinformation from doctors. Also my dermoid tumor, the first one I had, I did actually have a second one 3 years ago that I had to get removed. But the first one I had for like maybe 3 or 4 years before this like nurse practitioner, lovely woman was checking me out in place of my regular doctor. And she was like, this isn't right. Your ovary is like, we can't find it. Like we need to get you to an MRI right now. And within 3 days, I was getting surgery from this like step-in nurse practitioner woman who was just like, save the day. But yeah, so that's a long-winded way of saying why I've chosen fertility awareness method now. And I'm really excited to continue learning because I've already noticed so much with my cycle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. There's a couple of points that I want to touch on. My goodness. Whenever I do this format, I mean, it's quite a few years that you took us through and quite a few things that happened. And I think I also felt this way in our very first session of the program when everybody kind of took a moment to share their own experiences. Because I'm always just really grounded in how important it is for women to have options. Because for all the women out there who use the IUDs and have a really great experience, and all the women out there who use hormonal contraceptives and don't really have any issues with it, there are a whole bunch of women that have a ton of issues with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a lot, and the issues that they have are often very severe. And so what I hear from your experience, is that obviously you were trying to do the right thing, the best thing, not only as a way to quote treat your issue, like the cysts that you were experiencing, but based on your doctor's instruction, but also obviously to do the responsible thing to prevent pregnancy. But yeah, when it doesn't work for you, so the hormones didn't work for you. And when you were sharing your story, I just thought, well, how blessed you are to have such a great sister to kind of level with you. That
Totally.
that was really a powerful moment. Not everybody has that. Someone to just be like, look, because, we're often worried to hurt someone's feelings, but because she's your sister, she can be like, look, like, I know you, like, this is not normal.
Yeah. Yeah. And not your personality, not your body. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Like I've noticed a huge change in you. And so I think, of course, that really struck me because not all of us have that. And it's one of those things that creeps up on you, particularly when you start using hormonal contraceptives when you're younger. So I'm certainly of the opinion that when we are younger in our teens and we're put on contraceptives in that point in our life where we're still getting to know ourselves, then it's certainly possible that we can then take on some of these traits to be part of our identity, like depression, anxiety, and even weight gain to some degree, unless it's really obvious immediately, which then there's when things happen abruptly and immediately, we're more likely to attribute it, but it doesn't always happen that way. So I feel like we're less likely, it kind of creeps up on us and we kind of assume it as a personal trait. And we are not often given the opportunity to attribute it potentially to this medication. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, something else that stood out to me, that you were experiencing depression and you were then put on medication for it. This is something I talk about on the podcast a lot. There's research that shows that teenage girls who are on birth control are also more likely to be on depression medication compared to women who are not on hormonal contraceptives. And again, this is part of why the conversation is so important. We need to know what the side effects are. And it just stands to reason, for any of the parents, the mothers, the sisters, the friends who are listening, if you have a teenage daughter who is really depressed and anxious and having panic attacks and having all of these symptoms that we are going to attribute to a psychological issue, if she's on contraceptives, we should actually ask the question of, could it be the contraceptive? And should she potentially do a trial period off of it? This is basic stuff.
Absolutely. I mean,
this
absolutely.
is like, I'm not saying anything groundbreaking. This is basic stuff here. But for whatever reason, it's just not part of what we do. So the other thing, like, there's all these things because I feel like it's like, but when you shared, I mean, how horrible is it to be told at 23 that you can't get pregnant because you have PCOS? Now we could talk about that because when I was looking at your cycles and charts, I mean, It doesn't appear to be in the PCOS situation, but who knows what's going on about them. But
no.
So this is one of the challenges I found so PCOS is a very common diagnosis. And so I have seen in my practice over the years, women who have PCOS that have not been diagnosed. And I've seen many women who have been diagnosed with PCOS who don't actually fit the criteria of PCOS. And it is a myth that if you have PCOS, you are infertile. That is a myth.
Yeah.
It may be harder to conceive for a number of reasons. One of them being that if your cycles are 65 days long, then in a year, you have far fewer opportunities to conceive. So there are legitimate issues. And of course, PCOS is associated with inflammation and a variety of other factors. But just to put that out there, that's a myth that you can't. I've worked with many women with PCOS, and yes, they often have to work really hard to get those cycles in line, and it's possible they can do it. But the majority of my PCOS clients who've wanted to conceive have, just maybe not the exact minute, the first month that we work together, but the majority of my PCOS clients have conceived within so just to put that out there, because that, looking back, I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, totally, I feel like I really honestly, again, I had been on medication and this was like an underwater time of my life, but I remember not having a huge reaction to it. I remember feeling sad, like something is taken away from me, but also unsure of whether or not I wanted to be a mother, and just was like, there's other opportunities. My mama had trouble conceiving. We're all three of us are in vitro. So I was sort of like, there's other ways. Like if I want this, I can get this. And I also was living in Texas, and this was like this man doctor in this like urgent care that I needed to go to. And I was like, this can't, if I ever want to really go through this, I need a couple more opinions. But yeah, I felt so sad and so confused that every time I went to the doctor, there was something more wrong with me. It was always like, I'm going to the doctor and I have a dermoid tumor or a cystic ovaries or like painful bladder syndrome. It's just constant and daunting. And virtually it felt all the time like there was never a resolution. Like there was no one ever said, like, right now for my painful bladder syndrome, I take aloe vera 3 times a day, and that's what I'm using to manage it. I was on this toxic medication called Elmeron that was making my hair fall out, that, gives you macular degeneration. And it's the only thing on the market for this thing that is not studied. And it just constantly feels, and I could cry talking about it right now, but it constantly feels like you have to do your own research as a woman for what your body's doing. Like as if it's this foreign entity that nobody understands, that you have to figure out all on your own. Like we feel, I think, collectively so just like on an iceberg. And it's all like our health. I think it really hit me in the class recently with somebody talking about the ethical and moral dilemma of the vaccination, and if we shouldn't or shouldn't be and she's like trying to conceive, and they didn't study menstruation when they were studying. Like that's actually a fact. They did not study menstruation cycles while they were studying the vaccine. And I have the vaccine, but I can understand how a woman who is having trouble giving birth or getting pregnant not wanting to put anything that's so alien into your body. And now she's facing like maybe getting fired. And it's just kind of like, I don't know. It always just feels so lonely. Mm-hmm. And it's so challenging to be told at 23 that you can never get pregnant, and by a doctor that even then, because I had faced it so many times, just like, I was already just like, I've always been told something awful. And I just like, I don't know that I totally buy into this anymore. Like, I think I had been at least almost a decade into always being told something bad. And I was just like, I don't buy it. I'm not going to buy it.
Yeah, that's really interesting and telling. I think in one of the recent episodes with Dr. Aviva Ram, we really got into that whole thing of why you need to get a second opinion. And in our culture, we place a lot of emphasis on the doctor as God concept here. And no, they're not.
No,
doctors are people, and they're highly specialized in what they're trained in. And I think it's one of the things you said that I really resonate with is, it's not like, it's like we're foreign bodies, like they don't know what to do with us, right? And so many women feel that way. And so it's a really important reminder when you're told something like that by a doctor, that's not a death sentence, right? So it's important to consider getting a second opinion. So getting an opinion from another doctor, and even potentially getting a third opinion a third opinion from a functional medicine practitioner who is not, or who is, maybe they are a medical doctor with a functional background, or like a naturopath or something, somebody who has a functional perspective as well, just to really understand that there's more than one modality way of looking at how the body works, and remembering that. And I just wanted to touch on something else, because I think a lot of the women listening are resonating what you're saying. We can talk about how, quote, empowering it is to kind of find your own answers and do your own research and find, like in your case, you shared that the aloe vera that you're using has been really effective for you, potentially more effective than the medication that you were put on. And that's something that I'm guessing you had to really take the lead on and really research for you.
Absolutely.
And obviously try it and then see how it's actually working, and et cetera.
Yeah.
And so we could talk about how empowering it is, because that's one of the things about charting, right? You can chart your cycles, you start to really have a much deeper understanding of your body, and you do become more of the driver's seat, but it's not always easy. It's often very hard, because to go against what the doctors are suggesting, or to even ask questions that are kind of outside of their level of comfort and experience, it's not easy. So I've been there. I've cried in many a doctor's office because I'm relentless.
Yeah.
So I get what I need to get, but it's hard. I'll give you an example just to throw in the hat. But when I think I was probably 22 or 23. It's hard to remember the exact age, but I was in my early 20s. I was having cycle issues. Like I went to a doctor because my cycles were like 40 something days, and I wanted to see if there was anything they could tell me. And of course it was like go on the pill. But I also had this issue with my thyroid, and I had a little bit of hair loss. For the listeners, I'm pointing to my hairline. So I had a little bit of hair, like it's kind of just like when the hairline kind of goes back in one of those places. And so, I went to a doctor and I kid you not, the woman gave me a prescription for minoxidil, which is Rogaine. If anyone doesn't know what Rogaine is, it's what they give to bald men to grow their hair back. And she told me that I would eventually go bald. Like, you can't make this stuff up.
You can't make
You're
it up.
looking at me right now. I have hair. This was likely just a reaction to the issues I was having with my thyroid and some of the issues that I was having hormonally as a result of that. And so, I was literally told at the ripe age of 22 or 23 that I was going to go bald. And I was given a prescription for Rogaine.
And I can't imagine that Rogaine, and just like understanding hair loss now, having had some from my last medication and then trying to recover from it, it's a different prescription hormonally for men and women to regrow hair. Like it can't be the same. Like I can't imagine that. It's like, I don't know. That Rogaine
I didn't really look into it.
Maybe it does. I don't know.
I don't know if it worked or not. Like I bought it. It was a spray and I used to spray it on the spot. But ultimately, I'm not still doing that. And I still have hair. So, yeah. And that's one of many. So this
one of many. Yeah.
My goodness. But, I really do, like I said, appreciate you sharing your perspective, because it's something that I think we often need to take a step back from. And just remember, not everybody is different. We're all unique. There's a lot of similarities that we have, but I don't have two clients that are the same. And so you can take two people with with the same copper IUD, for example, right?
Yeah.
Two people, same IUD. And like in your case, you had to have it removed basically the moment it was put in, because it caused you so many problems. And other women are able to have it in for 8 years and are basically happy with it. So this is basically why I keep harping on this.
Yeah. I remember having the Mirena and meeting my partner's sister for the first time. And she was like, yeah, let's go on a walk. And I was like, I can't. We're walking around Prospect Park and I'm like, I can't, like, I want to keep this face on that I can keep doing this, but I can't walk. And it had been like a month at that point of having it, or like 3 weeks or something. But yeah.
All right. Well, let's switch gears. I mean, we could talk about
Yeah,
this all day, which I actually
forever.
kind of want to, but we're going to stop.
Yeah.
Um, just because we're also going to spend a little bit of time talking about your cycles. So I'd love to move to the session part of our session.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let me know what is at the top of your mind, what you want to make sure that we focus on today.
Yeah. So I haven't gotten my blood work back yet, but my temperatures are really low and have been for the last. So yeah, this is my cycle that I'm the most proud of, just because I was good at charting and good at tracking everything and kept a lot of notes. I also separately kept a written journal. But yeah, my temperatures are generally, I think, pretty low. And I want to work on getting them to a better place. And I'm not sure if it's diet stuff or thyroid stuff. So I've started with, or maybe something else, but I started with diet stuff. So I wasn't eating in the morning really, mostly just because I have sessions from, it's sort of like naturally intermittent fasting maybe. And I don't do it on the weekends as much, but yeah, I'll kind of wake up and have some coffee and go into session from like 8 to sometimes 11 or 12, and then I'll eat. And I was wondering, I don't know if that was what was affecting that. But now this cycle, which is not this cycle too, but this one, first of all, I haven't been feeling well. I've had an interstitial situs flare, but I've also been trying to eat in the morning, which not necessarily eat, but I'll have like a really dense smoothie, because that feels like kind of the only thing that I can. And I put like hemp in it and a lot of protein. And I also have started eating liver now and fermented foods, which is not something I was doing before. So I'm trying to get my diet in the right place. I've also been on this like new journey of exercising a lot, and I'm probably not eating enough because I've been eating pretty much the same while now doing some intense workouts. Some other days it's not as intense, but either way, it's more than I've been doing in the last like year or two. So my temperatures are the thing that I'm definitely want to work on. My periods have shortened a lot and are much more manageable than they've ever been. My PMS also last cycle, and I don't know if that was just because I had just started doing some of the things. I like basically didn't have any PMS, and my period felt really healthy for the first time ever. It's almost strange to me to have a period that lasts like 4 or 5 days, because it's normally 7 or 8, and like maybe 4 really heavy days. Like I'd say these heavy days were normal heavy days from what you showed as in class of how much you should be bleeding. Yeah. And also my PMS, like maybe I had one day of like a moment of feeling like I'm ready to fight my partner specifically, but I kind of refrained and was able to manage it. And it just wasn't intense irritability. It wasn't intense pain. I actually had no breast tenderness for the first time ever, which is usually one of the things that bothers me the most. But yeah, and then I got my period, and it wasn't, I think the first day was like a little bit achy, but nothing felt severe. Yeah. And then I think otherwise, like I do, as you can see on my chart, drink a lot. I mean, this is anywhere from like a glass of wine a night, or to like maybe on the weekends having a night of drinking. I think one of the days in here I was like actually really hungover, and I'm, yeah, just being honest about who I am. So that could also be something that's affecting my temperatures, obviously. Yeah. So that's that. The other thing that I'm having, I guess the biggest problem with, and this feels more associated with this cycle, because there was like clear cervical mucus days this cycle than there feels like there is this current one. Like today, granted it's early in the day, but feels like a dry day. Yesterday felt like maybe not dry. Yeah, I'm having like a little bit of confusion currently. And I don't know if that's because I'm actually checking in the right way, like wiping and then wiping again after I pee, and checking the tissue again. And I think that is sort of where I'm feeling the most confused. So yeah, that's what I got.
Okay, well, I'll start with the easier, shorter question to answer, which is the wiping.
Yeah.
So, well, first of all, my recommendation is to wipe, before. you go and then after. And before you look at the toilet paper, make a decision to decide what the sensation is.
Mm-hmm.
So just make that decision and stick to it. So if
Okay.
it feels, so are you comfortable based on your previous chart here, you did experience all three sensations. So there's only three: dry, smooth, or lubricative. And so now that you've had that experience, do you feel relatively comfortable about what's the difference?
Well, I think the thing that I'm like now, that cycle day 9 that says smooth, consistency 8, and color clear, I actually feel, and I was thinking about this during the cycle.
Is cloudy.
Cloudy. Yeah.
Make sure.
Yeah. So I can't remember all the way back to CD9, but I remember that I was initially feeling like, I think this might be a dry day. So I don't know if I marked that totally right, because I think then when I was feeling like it was smooth, it might be that it's a CM day. And right now I'm feeling a smooth sensation, but it doesn't seem like there's any cervical mucus on the tissue.
Okay. Well, so this is why it's important to just decide how it feels. Don't interpret it. So it's either dry or smooth or lubricative. So don't make any decisions about anything or what it's supposed to be, but just when you wipe, you can even close your eyes and just make a decision.
Do it. Yeah.
Put the stake in the ground, because what happens if there's no test? So there's no what if I'm wrong? It's your chart.
For sure. Yeah.
So then the second thing is that a dry observation, or what we consider a dry day, sometimes it feels dry, sometimes it actually feels smooth. And that can be a result of the vaginal cell slough. So, so that in of itself, it can be smooth and still be a dry day.
Sure.
So anyway, so that's kind of my first. So don't doubt your observations. Let's just get it on the chart.
I would say that vaginal cell sloth is definitely the thing that's that's the hardest for me to recognize.
Well, so how it typically shows up. So for the listeners, I teach a external wiping method. Of course, we have conversations about internal checking too, and when that might be appropriate. But generally speaking, that's how I teach. And so generally speaking, then on those days of vaginal cell slough, you might have a sensation of smooth when you're wiping, and the toilet paper might be shiny.
Yeah.
So at this stage, what we want to do is just write down what you see. So my analogy is, you want to be the objective journalist, where you're making an observation and you're writing it down, and then we can come back together and talk about it and kind of work it out. But you don't need to worry about. Most of my clients are type A. It's just, it comes with the territory. Not all, but many, because anyone who's voluntarily choosing to, monitor their fertile signs every day and write it down and analyze it is typically a detail-oriented type of individual. It's just what it is. And so we then want the chart to be perfect, of course. And we're tempted to, if the observation doesn't fit what we think it should be today, we're very tempted to try to no, it couldn't have been smooth. No, it was.
Yeah.
So just write it down. So hopefully that's helpful. So what that means though, is that let's say if we go back to that day that you were asking me about. So, well, I'll just I don't know if this example goes specifically for that day, but sometimes you might find that if you have just a very tiny bit of cervical fluid that day, that you might wipe and it might even feel dry.
Yeah.
And then you're going to see that there's something on the toilet paper and think it can't be, but it was. So I encourage you to write down what it is. You can always write a note. You could say, I wasn't expecting it to be dry, but you could write, but at the end of the day, we want to get into the habit with this particular method of charting of just calling it as it is. We want the raw data. Then that also helps us to get a sense of what's normal for you.
Yeah.
So a big part of especially the first chart or two that we chart together. So basically, right now, I always say the first chart is a learning chart. You learn so much. I can imagine that you feel like you know so much more going into the second chart than you did going into the first.
Yeah.
And so we're still kind of in that stage. And so a big part of it is to figure out what's normal for me. Do some of my clients do have more cell slough. And so we'll see more of those smooth observations than others. And so part of it is really figuring out like what's happening for me, because then that also helps you when we're getting into the birth control information to start understanding what your fertile window looks like and how to identify when you're moving into it, so that we can, when it comes to the birth control aspect. So yeah, is that helpful with?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. And so, yeah, so don't worry about, going back or whatever, but moving forward. Because what probably happened is you're probably like, so I'm seeing the chart and there's like a couple of days where the sensation is marked and a couple of days where it's not. And so there's probably a couple of days in there where the sensation didn't match what you thought. And so you know what I mean? Like, and that's okay, but just.
Yeah. Again, also I was like feeling kind of sick the last few days. So I'm wondering if, some of it might just, I was like in bed for 2 days, kind of feeling like my IC flare and then also a little bit congested. And then, yeah, it was kind of hard to track.
Yeah. Well, and when stuff like that happens, again, if you see something that is not really typical for you during a time like that, it's also helpful information. It's kind of helpful to know, especially given that you're managing this chronic condition. It can be helpful to see if your mucus does change when you're having a flare and how it changes. That could be a helpful piece of information. And so again, it's the way I look at the cycle isn't that, oh, this is wrong. This is wrong mucus. Like it's your body is your body. There's no wrong. There's no right. It just is. And so it's really, we're just kind of like actual scientists, we're looking at the data and we're trying to decipher, what does my cycle look like when I'm in my ovulatory window? What does it look like when I've got a flare up? Does it change? If I'm feeling sick, is there a change? And this is how we kind of start to understand that vital sign aspect of it. Like if there are specific changes when you do have certain health issues, that's really helpful information. You could, you might even get to the point that you're so stealth that you could see some subtle changes in your mucus and like up the aloe vera and like ward it off. Like I don't know. I'm not trying to say that we're good, but like, I'm just putting it out there. There are certain times when you can get so stealth with your observations that you can pick up these really minute details, but we don't know. We'll have to see if there are actually signs if you have a flare.
Right.
It's time, ladies. Time to take your fertility awareness knowledge and confidence to the next level. Just popping into today's episode to invite you to join us for the next round of Fertility Awareness Mastery Live. My 10-week group coaching program is designed to help you unlock the secrets of your menstrual cycle. Fertility Awareness Mastery teaches you everything you need to know about using fertility awareness cycle tracking to achieve your intentions. Whether you're currently trying to get pregnant, avoiding pregnancy, or planning to conceive in the future, we've got you covered. This program goes deep. Get to the root of your period problems, hormone imbalances, fertility challenges, and so much more. Early bird registration is now open, but only for a limited time. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/fam to register today. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAM. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode. So I did want to ask you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I marked on my cat because I think I sent that maybe 2 days ago, and I have another day of IC flare. So yeah, I'm sort of, but I did ward it off the last 2 days with some aloe vera. So now I'm back to normal, it feels like. But what I've noticed so far in just taking more aloe vera and feeling sick, having an IC flare, is that I'm actually feeling drier than I was last cycle. Like that's mostly what I'm feeling so far.
Yeah. And there could be different reasons for that. Mm-hmm. I did want to ask you about your PMS symptoms because that sounded like a pretty significant shift. So you said that you didn't have the symptoms that you usually do and your period was a lot different. So, question, why do you think that is? Or did you actually, because you started implementing some of these changes likely towards the end. So what changes? I think you mentioned you're eating more food, adding more protein, things like that. So you started that last cycle then.
Yeah. Last cycle was when I started exercising more rigorously, I guess, and also eating better, like adding liver, adding fermented foods, being really conscious of making sure that I don't get myself to a place of starving. And sometimes with work, I can be like stressed out and just not thinking about food. And then I'll just like be like irritable because I haven't eaten anything yet. And I'm like, oh, I just have to like feed myself. Also, the caffeine intake is something that I've been trying to minimize, which has been really hard. And I'll say that I'm not doing great at it. But specifically when I noticed that I would feel any sort of irritability or pain with my period or right before my period, it was like when I was drinking caffeine. So I just stopped. It would be like I'd have 2 sips and I'd feel crampy or achy or annoyed. And so caffeine is definitely, I think, my next biggest battle. But definitely the diet and exercise shift, I think, was the biggest shift. And I mean, that's been the diet and exercise shift has been an extremely significant shift since how I've been behaving the last like year and a half or something. I have not been exercising this much. I'm not like a person that doesn't, I mean, working from home has been a significant shift, right? You know, I'm live in New York City. Like I typically walk around a lot, and that's a huge change when you're sitting at home. So I think, yeah, now it's like implementing the exercise because I'm actually not getting as much as I was at all before. So yeah, that's I think been really helpful. And the diet change too has been really helpful, though I'm still working on trying to make sure that I have like the smoothie every morning and not drink an entire like vat of coffee in the way that I was before.
Well, because one of your biggest concerns was the temperature.
Yeah.
So a question then, in terms of your exercise, so now with the new exercise routine in a week, about how many days are you exercising and like how many hours per time, just generally?
I probably am exercising 5 days a week now, and I'll have 2 really intense workouts at Orange Theory, which is 30 minutes of cardio and 30 minutes of weights. And that's 2 days that I do that. Otherwise, I do a yoga day, which is more restorative. And then I do 2 other like 30-minute cardio days, which will be typically on my stationary bike. But I plan on implementing also like going for a jog or going for a bike ride outside if it's like nice out.
Okay. Well, so one thing to consider with temperature. So I think you kind of have a sense of it already. And I think you're still working it all out. So it sounds like you incorporated more food in general, which is necessary. One thing I do see, it's kind of early to tell, but in the previous cycle, look at this one. In your September cycle, the temperatures were, I'm not sure if you can see it. Now I'm looking at like even before, like an earlier one. I'm looking at your temperatures. So it looks like they were low, but the temperatures in the October chart were kind of quite low. Some of them, they were kind of dancing around a really low, like a lot of the temperatures in this October chart were under 97.
Mm-hmm.
And so far in your new chart, in this new cycle, we're not seeing any under 97. So
I mean, that day that I did actually take my temperature that day that the disturbance is there and I was feeling sick, and it was under. But I also took it at like 3 p.m. and I had been up, but I didn't sleep all night. And then I fell asleep I finally fell asleep from like 5 a.m. till 11 or 12. It was just like a rough, sick, painful night. So I actually did take my temperature that day, and that was below 96, I think, but it didn't clock it registered on this thing because I mean, it wasn't my BVT. It was like 3 p.m. I had been up. I don't know what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you record something like that in a situation where you know that it's really questionable, you can always mark that on the app as a questionable temperature. So that's something to keep in mind. But I'm encouraged that we're seeing an improvement there. So it's not exactly, all the temperatures aren't over. So I'm looking for, generally speaking, ideally in the pre-ovulatory phase, to have the majority of the temperatures over about 97.4. And so we're not seeing all of them, but that's a huge improvement if you just look at the difference between the pre-ov and the post-ov. So your body's responding to it. And I think you kind of already know what's the next step. So with the temperatures, I find that the first step is always, as inconvenient as it is, to look at the food, like how much you're eating and to the sleep, because that's what governs our metabolism. If you're not eating enough, then your body has to conserve energy by reducing your temperature. Like so that's something that we want to look at. So in terms of maintaining that more optimal body temperature, the next steps are basically what you know. So on those exercise days, you want to make sure that you are somehow getting in more. So even that, if that means that you're purposely eating a bigger meal at lunch and dinner, but you want to make an effort. And generally speaking, you'd probably be hungrier on those days.
Yeah, and I am. So I respond normally to that, just that.
Yeah.
But I think still, say I work out at like noon and I have like a normal morning, I'm not typically hungry. And then what I was doing was just working out anyway without putting like anything into my stomach.
So that's huge what you've done to incorporate that. And the other thing, so part of the reason I pick on coffee is that caffeinated beverages, so I'll throw them all under the bus. I'm equal opportunity offender here. So coffee, caffeinated tea, energy drinks, I'm fair game here. So caffeinated beverages, they suppress your appetite. I mean, that's why so many women can get away with not eating breakfast.
Yeah, we love it. We love coffee as women. We want to be rail thin. So
yeah, it's almost like, I don't know, I wasn't alive in the 60s, but back when they used to advertise cigarettes and they had that brand, like for Virginia Slims, so basically they were saying like smoke and it suppresses your appetite and then you'll be skinny.
Oh, I mean, I was that girl. Like I mean, 1960s, I think early 2000s, I was that girl, which I'm not proud of, but I think some of the cigarettes are out, but sort of. They're mostly out.
I didn't even know that. Just so that you know that I hadn't looked at that part of the. So I just was saying that because I feel like it's because I can picture the ads in my head, and the mode of action is that it's suppressing appetite, and so it's really convenient when you're trying to intermittent fast, or when you're busy, or when you just have it in the back of your mind.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I really think some of these behavior, like as like recovered of an individual as I feel that I am with food and all that body image stuff, just mostly being so much more comfortable with my own self now. It's still some of these old behaviors that have lingered and just that they've been so normal to me. Like coffee in the morning has been a very normal thing for me for majority of my life, I'd say. So as I've gotten older, I do feel that as I've gotten older, I've gotten less hungry all the time. Like I don't, in high school, I was ravenous and I was super athletic and I was running around all the time. So I wanted to eat all the time. That is like not true as a mid-30s something, it's not that I'm hungry all the time. So yeah, the coffee habit has definitely just stuck around. And it's funny to talk about it as a problem now, getting into the fertility awareness stuff, because I was not considering that whatsoever before. I mean, also all of this has been like the sexual education class that we should all get as kids in high school. Like it's really crazy to me that I'm just being made aware of some of the things that goes on with my body as like a 33-year-old person. I'm like, wait, so you post-ov can't get pregnant? I did not get that. Like, I didn't know it turns into a gland and you cannot. I've told like a few of my girlfriends that too. And they're like, I didn't know that either though. It's like,
it's not a thing that unless you are fortunate enough to stumble across fertility awareness. And it's scientific. It's not like someone didn't make this up in their backyard. Like there's a lot of research papers that have looked at this and they've looked at it in different ways. So there's one of the papers that I refer to a lot is a paper where they specifically measured. So they had a bunch of women who were trying to get pregnant and they measured to identify which days of the cycle that they had sex, like when it resulted in pregnancy and how likely a particular day of the cycle in relation to ovulation was going to lead to pregnancy. And that particular study showed that the only time pregnancies happened was when the sex occurred on the 5 days leading up to ovulation day and ovulation day itself. And then it breaks down the percentage chance of conception based on those days. So if it's like 5 days before, there's a lower percentage, statistically speaking, versus on ovulation day itself. But either way, there was no pregnancies outside of that window.
Yeah.
So it's like science. And we learn a lot about our eyes and ears. I mean, I remember, I think I just always complain about this. Maybe the ear section of biology just really irritated me. Irritated, sorry. But, but either way, it was, I remember it because and honestly, like it was interesting, but it's useless information.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't go into that field of study. So like learning about your fertility, given that the majority of women I know, at least at some point in their lives, are considering having a child. Everyone doesn't necessarily make that decision, but the majority of women I know at some point in their lives consider having a child. So I feel like this is useful, practical information that we could all like, what's the excuse?
Yeah. I have some people that I know close to me that I won't mention their names are also thinking about getting pregnant. And I'm like, you need to get into this just to track and to know and to have the information that you've never gotten in sexual education classes in high school. Like they basically just told women presenting people that it was like, you're not supposed to enjoy sex and you're going to get pregnant if you do it at any time ever. So use a condom or abstain, but like sex is bad, sort of.
Well, and I've said this many times on the podcast, you know, my sex education in the school that I went to when as a teen was, if you have unprotected sex, not only will you get pregnant, but you'll get AIDS and die.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah,
Period.
totally.
And
it was like
quote.
in tandem. Yeah, it was like in tandem. Sexual education was followed up by like HIV awareness. And yes. It was like, they were both intermingled.
Which
like
I totally
interwoven.
Understand. It's important to know about the risks associated with STIs. Like this is important information, but I'm just like saying.
They weren't teaching HIV awareness like in the same way either. I remember them telling us in like the AIDS education class saying, yeah, if you use a glass pipe to smoke marijuana out of, and you share it with somebody that has a cut lip and is HIV positive, you may be able to get HIV. And it was like, so you're saying to be totally afraid of this person that has this diagnosis. Like it's always fear-based. It's always like, just be scared and you'll be saved. It's like, I don't understand.
Yes. It's a hot mess.
Totally.
Well, and bringing it back to optimizing your temperatures and all of these things. Yeah. So it's more than just the temperature. So when we're looking at the menstrual cycle as a vital sign, the temperature, when we get your temperature in an optimal range, it's a sign that now your body has, if that's the issue. So if you do all these things and the temperature is still really low, then we're going to have to kind of go down the list and look at other potential issues. But these are the issues that I focus on before I get into, could I have this rare problem? Like maybe it's just that you need to eat. So let's try that first. Similar to my rant about the doctors putting teenage girls on depression medication. It's like, let's just try this other thing first. And like, if you're still depressed, then let's look at the medication then, like super basic.
Yeah.
But so, it's something to look at with the coffee. So you're going to make that decision. What I always say is to my clients is it really depends on what your goals are and how important it is to you. So this is something that you're obviously working on now. And so I think it doesn't mean like never drink coffee again. Obviously that's not what we were saying, but it's more of being aware of it. So being aware that especially on those exercise days, it suppresses your hunger. I can't tell you how many clients that I've worked with who they bite the bullet and they either like cancel the caffeine, or they kind of wean, or they just reduce. I've had a number of clients who like, they just like cancel it. And often there's other effects that they don't anticipate. So the most common being like their sleep improves. I've had a number, like that's not why we cut it out, but I've had a number of clients who then all of a sudden the sleep is like way better. But what my primary concern is right now in general is that you're wanting to improve the temperatures. You've also added in this extra exercise. And I think one of the biggest myths growing up as a child of the 90s was the calories in, calories out. So when we're trying to like lose weight, we need to eat less food, and it's a math equation, and we're like basically not even humans, right? We're just like a robot, right? Yeah. So, but for optimal menstrual cycle health, what we need is what's called a eucaloric state, meaning we need enough energy. And so you can certainly look at, we've talked about increasing protein intake. You can look at what that needs to look like, but ultimately it's easier to eat more when you reduce or cut the coffee because
Yeah.
then you actually feel the true extent of your hunger. And
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things where I don't expect you to take my word for it. You just have to try it for yourself and see.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that I am at this age also, I had been in recovery for an eating disorder. And I think once I had gotten off of that, like went to a rehab facility in Texas, once I had gotten off of that, I've always been like, I will never diet. Like even fantasizing about diet or controlling my food is so like, it's just no go for me. And so now the way that I look at it is like, I always kind of intuitively eat, but it's true that coffee absolutely suppresses my appetite. So if I do remove that any day, which I have a few days here and there throughout the last like couple months or month and a half, I can feel the full extent of my hunger, and I'm hungry at like 10 o'clock in the morning or 9:30 versus when I do normally eat, which is like 12:30. 11 or 12:30, 1 o'clock or something.
Well, and I was looking at some, research on this as well, because it's like, it's all well and good for me to talk about my experience, but we live in a day and age where people want the science, right? So
Yeah.
they've done studies on it, whether if you skip breakfast, because if you skip breakfast, you obviously will likely eat more at lunch than you potentially would have. I feel like that's common sense. But then the question is, are you actually going to eat the equivalent of what you would have eaten had you not skipped breakfast? And
Right.
so the research that I've looked at shows that although you will eat more at lunch, it doesn't, the amount that you eat at lunch and dinner isn't actually equivalent to what you would have eaten if you just ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so, what I've seen is that if you want the kind of healthy hormone situation where you're having sufficient estrogen as you approach ovulation, you want to have a good, strong luteal, you want to reduce the PMS symptoms, and you want to have it all balanced. You want to have a long enough luteal phase. The first step is eating enough food, getting enough protein, eating more on exercise days. And then, if you're still having issues with progesterone, there's different things we can do to add in, magnesium is well studied, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's things that we can do, but that would be, so I feel like you've done amazing. I think it's just worth thinking about, okay, so what is actually practical? Does it make sense for me to actually switch to decaf sometimes so that I still get my, like, I love the taste, but I don't have as much caffeine? Does it make sense to switch to tea? Tea still caffeine. So herbal tea.
Yeah. Equal opportunity.
Yeah. Equal opportunity. Yeah. So there is arguably, less caffeine in certain black teas compared to really heavy, strong coffee, but you could make that tea as strong as you want. So I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so this is something to explore. And one of the things that you could consider is, if you want, it depends on, again, how intense you want to go, but you could consider doing like one full cycle. Like you could consider that. You could do a week.
Yeah.
Too, but you could consider that. And then you have your charting. And so you'll be able to see for yourself what happens when you do that. And it's often very eye-opening. And then paying attention to how you're sleeping, how you're feeling, also like your recovery when you're working out. Because if you're eating more and getting good rest, then your recovery and all that should also be improved.
Yeah, I was reading that also. I think this was what inspired part of the really trying to work on the coffee thing, was in the fifth vital sign talking about, because I will do this thing where I'll drink it early. And then typically, because of the way I'm the way that I work as a therapist is that I'm around other people's schedules. So it's like, I'll work from 8 to 12, and then I'll work later in the day from like 3 or 4 to, 8. So I'll have coffee then when I start the second half of my day. And I'm a pretty good sleeper, but I can tell that it takes a lot for me to fall asleep. I can stay asleep. It doesn't actually I don't wake up in the middle of the night late as of lately. That's not always typical, but definitely for the past year, I've been sleeping a lot better. I can also tell that my temperatures are higher because I used to be doing something where I would like take my temperature every day at 7 o'clock in the morning, but that's not the natural time that I wake up really. So yeah, if I have a client at 9 o'clock, I will like take my temperature around 8:30 now. And if there's other days where I naturally wake up at 10, I take my temperature then. And I think that's also helpful in seeing kind of more what my temperatures are doing. And I've noticed when I sleep more, my temperatures are higher. So I think if I'm eliminating coffee and I have more solid sleep where I'm not going to sleep at 12 a.m. or 11 and then waking up at like 10 sometimes, I'll have a better sleep pattern if I'm not drinking coffee all day.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned that you said, I don't have trouble staying asleep, but falling asleep. So that's one of the things that I think people notice, may or not. I don't know if you're paying attention, you might notice, but many people who drink coffee every single day. So that's another thing that I have to say about coffee, because, so for example, like I like ice cream, but I don't always have it in my fridge. So like I buy it and I eat it sometimes. I usually buy like a smaller, more expensive version so that it's like I'm not buying a giant vat.
Yeah.
But my point of bringing this up was more just, I like it, but it's not a thing that I do every single day. And so if there was an effect, it's not something that's consistent. But with most of the women that I work with, coffee isn't something that you drink once in a while, that you have like a couple times a month, and it's like really fun.
It's a vibe.
It's an actual habit. And so we don't often realize how that can affect. So
it's a lifestyle.
Yeah. It is. So I think in your case, I have every reason to believe that change will make that'll have the effect that you want. And so that's where we kind of get into the conversation with our body. Like, this is giving you an opportunity to actually see, like, how does this habit of mine affect my cycles? How does it affect my hormones and my temperature?
Mm-hmm.
And so then what happens is, after a couple cycles of experimenting with this, it doesn't mean you'll never drink coffee again, but now you actually know, and you'll be able to be more intentional, I suppose, with your coffee consumption, as opposed to just, because what happens, and this is, so I think as I get a little bit older, so I'm almost 40, I think next year I turn 40. What year is it? Yeah. So next year I turn 40. I work with clients of all ages. So I have clients who are in their 20s and I have clients who are in their 40s. And what I've observed when we look at the cycles is that there's a lot of things we get away with in our 20s. Like, I feel like our 20s, most of us can get away with a lot. Like, you can drink the coffee, you can stay up late, you do all the stuff. And yeah, it affects you. It's not good for you, but your body really seems to bounce back, like, generally speaking. When we get into our 30s, there's a little bit less leeway, but we can still get away with quite a bit. As we get into our later 30s, though, that's when stuff starts to go haywire. That's when the PMS symptoms start to get really bad, or, you start to have these symptoms with your cycle that you didn't have before. And it's because I believe we have less resilience as we get older. So it's a really great opportunity for you now to kind of get into this dance with your body and kind of see what's really affecting it, and like what you can do to optimize your hormones, and like kind of get some of those habits into a place that is working for you. Then when as naturally in the next few years, it won't be this big like shock. Because for many women, it's this huge, like, just shocker when all of a sudden, like, I had a number of clients this year who had some of those experiences, like in a more severe fashion, like bleeding by the time this episode is released, I will have released my FAM practitioner series. And my client Liliana had the experience of bleeding for 4 months straight.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's like, this is what can happen when you're like, you have certain habits that have built up over the years that your body was totally handling, but kind of comes to a head when we get later in our reproductive years.
Totally. And also, like, I am TTA now, but that's not my intention forever. So knowing now, just if it is something that's making my progesterone drop or mess with my estrogen levels, then I want to be able to sustain a pregnancy and at some point in my life, and knowing now is kind of the point.
Yes. Well, and what I always say is, pregnancy is possible in any cycle with ovulation, even if the cycle isn't perfect looking. But when you're in the stage like you are of avoiding pregnancy while charting, then you really have the opportunity to work on all these things. And there's no stress or pressure. We're doing this because you want to be. So there's no actual stress of, I need the temperature. Like, we're doing this because you're choosing to do this. And there's no pressure on that. And so as the cycles go, as long as we keep working on it, I always tend to see improvements when we address the issues. And so by the time that you're ready, what can happen, ideally, what we're aiming for is that you've brought your cycles into normal parameters. Everything's pretty good, so that when you're ready, you're not also working on those things. Like you're in a pretty good place, and often, not always, but often pregnancy can happen a little bit easier. Obviously, that's the goal when you're ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, so I know there was a few other things that we will check in about. I think one of the questions that we can probably attack on the tail end was drawing the cover line for temperature.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the topics I think we'll cover in your next hot seat sessions in class. But yeah, share with me your question about the cover line. I know I drew one here on your October chart.
I feel like I just don't get it. Like I keep trying to, I just keep trying to figure it out. And I feel like I can't totally understand in each cycle where I would draw it. It's really just that simple.
Well, yeah, I think one of the things that I will definitely point out, so because I've been doing this for a long time, my eyes are trained to kind of not look at all of the ups and downs. I can see those general trends. So what I'm doing here is kind of pointing out visually some of the temperatures that are kind of outside of what's normal.
Okay.
So that you can see how my eye looks at it. So I just circled 4 temperatures that were kind of high. Yeah. So when I'm looking at it, I'm able to kind of discern that general pattern. So now that I've circled the one, so basically for the listeners, we have the pre-ovulatory temperatures, which are lower, and we have the post-ovulatory temperatures that are higher. But we also have 4 what I would call outlier temperatures, meaning 4 temperatures that are kind of high. They don't really, in the before ovulation, that don't really match the general group of temperatures. And so that's one of the ways that I do it, because then you can see that the vast majority of the pre-ovulatory temperatures fall below this line, and none of the post-ovulatory temperatures go below it.
Okay.
So it's a little trickier when you have a couple of the kind of ups and downs, but generally speaking, where we're going to draw the line is a little bit higher than the highest normal of the 6, like the previous 6.
The 6.
So we're always looking for 3 temperatures that are higher than the previous 6. And actually, if we look at the advanced temperature rules, so in the advanced temperature rules, we have this temperature on day 19 that's high, and then we have day 20 that drops below the line. But then on day 21 and 22, it's above the line. So we could look at, in this situation where you have one temperature that drops below, then we need a total of 3 temperatures that are higher. And the third has to be 3.5 boxes higher. So I'll just write it down here just so that you can, I'll just keep writing on the chart.
Oh, so that might be my first.
Yeah, we could use that as the first because it fits into those rules. So
because the third is 3 boxes higher.
Yeah. So in total, sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Thank goodness for mute. That was a good one. So with the advanced temperature rules, ultimately, when we have one temperature that's dropping below the cover line, then we still need 3 temperatures that are higher than the previous 6. And then the third, as long as the third is 3.5 boxes, so 0.36 Fahrenheit higher, then we can accept it. So essentially, for that interpretation of it, that's how we can go over that in class again if it's
maybe I ovulated on what is that, cycle day 18, is it?
Yeah, so we have your peak day was day 16,
right?
And then
ovulation day was 18.
Yeah, so that would be my estimate. It kind of makes sense, and there could have been a reason that this temperature was a bit lower. Not sure.
Yeah, I don't think I remember.
Well, so there's 2 ways to look at it. One is that, well, first of all, the most accurate way to confirm ovulation would be a daily ultrasound, but I still haven't met anyone with an ultrasound machine in their house. So then, the second best way is through charting. And so we want to always keep that in mind. So with charting, we're getting a really accurate measure of ovulation, but I would say within a day. Like we always have to kind of think of it that way, where because it's definitely second to the tech that we don't typically use every day.
Yeah.
With your peak day here, peak day is highly correlated with ovulation, and up to 80% of the time ovulation happens either on the last day of your peak mucus or the day before or after. And so it's not uncommon then for it to happen, up to 2 days after. That's not something that's completely out of the realm of the possibility. So for the purpose of birth control, I'll just go through the rules with you real quick here. So based on the mucus, we're looking for peak +3. So the 4th day after peak would be the first day based on the mucus rules that unprotected sex would be allowed. So that would be cycle day 20. But based on the temperature rules, like I said, if we're using the advanced rules and we're looking in this case for this 4th high temperature, which does meet the criteria, that brings us to cycle day 22. So when we go with the later of the two, then we would cycle day 22 based on temperature would be the earliest post-ov day.
Okay.
And so it's good to do that every time, just get into the habit of it. It's good to always so you did write in the peak here. And on you're using the Read Your Body app. So on the app, you can actually note when you write the temperature that this is the first of the rise. So you can do it and it'll put the numbers in there. And so you can just get into the habit always of doing that calculation so that you can always identify this is the first post-ovulatory infertile day. So that when you're ready to move to that next step of utilizing those post-ovulatory infertile days, that you've had a little bit of practice identifying that for yourself.
Right.
And you can set the baseline in your app. So if you go to the part of the app that has the image of the chart at the top corner, if I remember correctly, it has a little image that looks like a chart, and you can go in there and set the baseline. And so you decide where it's going to go, but it just goes a little bit higher than kind of the highest of the normal previous 6.
Okay. And so in this one where you marked the first, the 6 before that, like that one outlier wouldn't count because I had one that's low before.
Correct. So you had one random temp on cycle day 13 that was like 97.8. So that's why I circled that one, because that doesn't really match, right?
What's going on?
Yeah.
Right.
The vast majority of the temperatures are below this line here.
Yeah. Okay.
And I mean, there's a lot of as you continue with, so there's different factors that could be affecting it. So you did mention alcohol consumption. So it seems like in your case, drinking a little bit the night before doesn't always shoot up your temps, right? So we're not really seeing that. It could happen occasionally. So there could be other factors that could be affecting your temperatures, but if anything,
I really feel like it's sleep stuff, to be honest.
So if you have a disturbed sleep or something like that, then you can make a point of marking, just thinking about if there was something out of the ordinary, and then that'll help you figure out, is there something that's happening on these particular days? And that'll help you to kind of pinpoint what's really an outlier and what's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I feel like so much more clarity right now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's what we're going for.
Yeah, totally. And I'm looking at this, and I guess there was one day of PMS that I felt like crying. And I remember feeling like a little bit of winded. Like sometimes that happens when I'm PMSing, it'll just be just harder to catch my breath or something, because I have this like bearing down feeling. But then I was able to do like the yoga and the bike, and I guess I was bloated one day, but I don't know. This PMS was so much better than any other PMS I've actually ever experienced in my life.
Well, I mean, let's hope that it, remains the same. What we can talk about in your next hot seat, we can talk about some strategies to so that it's not like a hope, so that we're actually kind of getting on top of it. But this is kind of the point, right? Like when we focus on some of these, what I call foundational factors, it really does help a lot of other things that you didn't intend. So your goal is, okay, I want to get my temperatures normal. And in doing that, by following the strategies that I'm sharing with you, you end up addressing a bunch of other stuff that you weren't necessarily trying to, but very happy that you did.
Yeah, honestly. I mean, it really is life-changing. It's so, I always have felt, because I've had to, in the way that women have to, felt in tune with my body, but this is like a whole other level. It's so interesting to have like actual data. Like I truly do feel like a scientist a little bit.
It's funny because it's like, I'm like 20 years in and I'm still really excited about this stuff, because it's really, it's really fascinating. And what I think one of my favorite parts about it is, I mean, I bring in a lot of theoretical data because I feel the need to, back up what I say, right? Obviously. I don't have all these, I have letters behind my name, but HRHP is not the same as MD. Like, it's just not.
Yeah, I know.
I put as many letters as I want behind my name, but it's not the same. And so I feel this need, obviously, to really share the research and the data. But the unique aspect of charting is that it's not theoretical, it's literal. And if I always say to my clients, if I don't know what I'm talking about, then we won't see any changes on the chart, right? Because it's not about what I think, it's about what's actually going to make the cycle better, and it literally, like, you're watching it happen in real time. So that's one of the things I love about it. It's not theoretical, even though we can add in those pieces, it's literal. It's like, what is going to help me not have as much period pain, or what is going to help me raise my temperatures. And that's, it either you do the thing and it either does or it doesn't, I love it.
And it's so not as soul crushing as being like on the iceberg, because there's actual data, like your body actually responds. You can see via your cervical mucus, your cervical height, and your temperatures. And like you actually get to see the data change.
Yeah. And I don't get to sit on my high horse when you tell me that I started this thing and I have this reaction. I don't get to sit on my high horse and say, no, you didn't. Yeah. You didn't have that reaction. That's impossible. I don't get to say stuff like that, because if you did a thing and then we look at your chart and there was a reaction that you've never had before, I don't get to say, no, it's not related. No, it couldn't be, because we literally just have to look at what's actually happening and either accept it or reject it. You know what I mean? Like, it's, so, and that's very different from many women's experiences. Unfortunately, when they're seeing their practitioners, when perhaps, they were experiencing certain side effects, or they're starting a new medication and something happens or whatever, and they're basically told, like, no, that's impossible. That couldn't cause it, even though you've never had that reaction before. And so I don't have those luxuries. I have to actually address the real data, which is a reflection of what's happening literally right now in your cycle.
Right now. Happening right now.
It's like a real-time thing. It's like, it would be like someone going to the doctor and having them measure their blood pressure. And the doctor's like, nah, like, no, you literally just measured it. Like, stop.
This happened with my best friend. She started taking Humira for like a colitis issue, and then also started losing some of her hair. So started taking this supplement called Nutrafol for hair growth. That is mostly just like natural vitamins. And her liver was off the charts, like cirrhosis level liver. And they told her it was Nutrafol and it wasn't the Humira. And I was like, there's no way that this like vitamin A supplement is the thing that's causing your liver to fluctuate this way while you're taking this like toxic medication on a injection, like on a monthly basis. And of course it wasn't true. She's now on Nutrafol and not on Humira, and her liver is totally fine.
Interesting. Well, and again, it's like I would just say, let's do the experiment, right? Like, remove the thing and let's see if it gets better. And so that's kind of the whole point.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and so I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This episode was super fun, and I'm sure really informative for the listeners, because we touched on a lot of different aspects and, some of those cool charting nuggets as well. For the woman who's listening, maybe she tuned in because she is thinking about coming off of contraception, or she's like looking at her options. What would you want her to know about making that transition
from HC to going into FAM? Honestly, I feel like the thing that you'd want to know is that you're not alone, and that this is a really scary thing, and that what you're feeling isn't like, you don't need to be, I mean, we are getting gaslit all the time by Western medicine and our doctors, but what you're feeling is actually happening. Like, it might actually just be hormonal birth control that's making you be in the darkest place you've ever been in your life. Like, this could be the reason for your depression and your anxiety and your sexual difficulties, or whatever the case may be. And you don't have to, I don't know, kind of like look no further. Like, you don't have to, it's not the only option. And it's really upsetting, I think, in hindsight, to feel like that was the only option for so long, like that this thing that big pharma isn't prophetizing off of is like totally available and totally useful. And you can be really successful on it, both if you're trying to avoid pregnancy and you're trying to conceive, you know?
Yeah. So it's so important because when there are some women out there who it really moves me when I hear it. It makes me really sad because when I hear stories of women who really do, they're getting to the point where they're literally saying to themselves, well, I know it's causing my this and that and whatever, but I just can't get pregnant right now. And so this is really, I just have to stay on it because whatever. And so I can't tell you how many times I've heard that where you're really hearing this sense of just, I have no other options. And so for women who are in those situations, and I mean, also there's other women who choose contraceptives for other reasons. Everyone isn't in the depth of despair to choose it, but many are. And that's, there are other options and you can learn to use it. So
go ahead.
Oh no, it's okay. Keep interrupting.
No, I guess we're a little bit biased being in class, but all of us have horror stories, all of it. It's really nice to be in that class and find community there because we all have these stories of either it not working for us or being told that because of our other symptom clusters, we should be on this thing to ameliorate it. And it's like, but then it adds all these other symptoms and now we're back in a worse place than we were before. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. And I do remember from our first session coming off of it and talking to my husband and just being like, this is why I keep going because many of the ladies in the class, it was literally just, it's not always like that, right? It's not like I keep saying that, but there are so many women who are in this horrific kind of like, I had all these really bad, like when you have side effects that are like on the really bad end and it just keeps happening when you try different stuff and you go on this one, you go on that one, you go on the other one. And then you realize like this stuff doesn't work for me, like, but there's nothing else like that is just horrible.
Yeah.
So last question of the day, for anyone who's thinking about jumping into the Fertility Awareness Mastery Live program, what would you want them to know about it?
It is the sexual education that you've never gotten. Like we should all be getting this sexual education. I keep saying that to everybody that I know. My sister is interested in getting pregnant at some point in the near future. And I'm buying you this class because I just like, you need to have it. And it's just like such a relief. Another thing that I can cry about for sure is just like, I can't believe being a mid-30s person and I haven't had this sexual education about my body before. I wish I had when I was 13, 14, 15 years old.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So thank you for doing this. You have to keep going. Don't stop.
Oh, well, thank you. It's there's such a need. It's just, and sometimes I get busy with my work and I kind of, you know what I mean? Like I have all these projects going on and I can tell you though, that whenever I start a new program or whenever I start with a new client and we kind of get into the like, okay, hello, who are you? Tell me about your history and we get into it. It always just strikes me. And so I have a heart for women. There's a lot of suffering that takes place. It's just completely unacceptable. So
absolutely. I'm with you.
So with that said, thank you so much for coming on the show and I'll see you soon.
Yeah. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/400. I hope that you enjoyed today's call with Rachel. It was such a great opportunity for her to share her story. And I think because so many women have experienced similar things, there's just a certain percentage of women who don't respond well to hormonal contraceptives. I think that's really the truth of the matter. And I think it's important to recognize that not everybody has the same experience. I've spoken to plenty of women who didn't really have any negative side effects, but ultimately there's a good population, a good percentage of women who do, unfortunately, they just don't do well on it. And in those cases, I think what makes me the most sad is to hear the stories of going from brand to brand to pill to IUD, having these negative experiences, and then getting to the point where you really feel like you don't have any choices, and wondering if you just have to suffer through this in order to have contraception. And hopefully the message that you've taken from today's episode and also the podcast in general is that no, you do have options. And although fertility awareness-based methods aren't necessarily going to be for everybody or for every period of time in your life, it's still an option that should be told to women, especially when they are having negative side effects with hormonal contraceptives, so that you never have to feel like you have to suffer through these side effects because you feel like there's no other way to do it. And so hopefully that is a takeaway, or at least one of the takeaways from today's episode. And otherwise, thank you for being part of the Fertility Friday community, helping me to achieve this incredible milestone of 400 episodes. And, no matter what you're doing today, I hope you have a wonderful, day, week, weekend, whenever you're tuning into the show. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.